how did we even get to this question,
Mm-hmm.
where people are now questioning truth? You think about the Enlightenment, like the Enlightenment is a response to what I like to call Christians behaving badly. The Reformation, we celebrated a lot, but there was a lot of blood that was shed after Martin Luther, nailed his theses to the church door. Like, you have the world looking on to that and being like, this look dumb. It don't look like this works, And so why would it work for me, And so because of that, they turn to rationalism. People don't just get to these questions, looking up at the sky. Like, these questions weren't created in a vacuum. They were created in a particular context. And we as Christians have the responsibility to respond to those things. Like, yes, we agree with you here and we grieve with you. However, this is the road that we're taking in terms of how we're answering this question.
What's up, everyone? Lisa Fields here, and I'm so excited about our new curriculum, Courageous Conversations. You heard about our popular conference, Courageous Conversations, where we invite the leading pastors, thought leaders, and scholars from conservative and progressive backgrounds for conversations. But we not only want to have those conversations on stage at the conference, but we want you to have them in your everyday life. So we developed a curriculum for you to do just that. Courageous Conversations curriculum, the tools you need for the conversations in culture. You can get that today on Amazon or on our website at jude3project.org. Well, thank you for watching another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lisa Fields, the founder of the Jude 3 Project. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Yana Connor. Welcome, Yana.
What's good, friend?
Before we get into today's episode, just tell our audience a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Yana Connor. I am originally from St. Louis, so I really enjoyed listening to Air Force Ones on the car ride here. I live in Durham, North Carolina. I don't know if I can say that anymore. Like 3 years ago, graduated from seminary at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I got an MDiv in Christian ministry. Out of that's really how I met you. I took a writing class and started putting stuff on the internet and just trying to see what the Lord would do with it. And then I got a message on Instagram. Listen, everybody can get a job like through Instagram. It's like all of my jobs have come through Instagram. But a friend of mine reached out to me and was like, hey, I had this project that came across my desk that I think you would be really good for. And my world kind of expanded in a moment, right? Of being exposed to Black scholarship, being exposed to books written by theologians that I had never heard of, who were of African descent. And all of that was like just through this introduction to like help write this curriculum for the Jude 3 Project. And I remember like we were on the phone and we were talking through the curriculum and you were like, yeah, this is what we want to do. And like, I was like, okay. Trying to put on a good front, like, yeah, I could totally do that. And then afterwards was like on my knees, like, Lord, how am I going to do this? But we ended up doing Through the Eyes of Color. And, what was really cool about that, Lisa, I'm going to brag on you a little bit, is that, like, nobody was supposed to ever know that I wrote that book. Like, nobody was supposed to know. Like, and then you, towards the end of the project, was like, people need to know that you wrote this book. And I was like, what? Like, it was just crazy to me. One, the generosity, the belief, the encouragement that you have in me has just been incredible. And really all of my jobs have been like out of that, even now I'm serving at a church in Hillsborough, North Carolina, Vertical Church. What's good, y'all? And I got that job because they saw a video that we did for the Courageous Conversations like virtual event. And yeah, like I was a Stevie Wonder girl to them. And so they were like, yo, I saw the Stevie Wonder girl at the coffee shop. And the next thing I know, I get this email asking me to preach and to lead a seminar or a growth track on apologetics. And so, yeah, my whole world has kind of opened up. So I do that. I serve at this church part-time as discipleship director. And then in addition to that, I write on the side. And a lot of that writing has been with the Jude 3 project. But then the Lord has opened up doors in other spaces. She Reached Truth, Lifeway, all those kinds of things. It's been really, really cool. So yeah, I'm a freelance writer. That's not something I ever thought would be possible, but God's been good.
Awesome. Well, I thank God for you and your abilities to write and your gifting and teaching and preaching. We're here today to talk about our latest curriculum, Courageous Conversations.
Whoop.
As she mentioned, she was our writer for Through Eyes of Color curriculum. It's a blessing to have people on our team that can write curriculum. Because if I was in charge of writing curriculum, it probably would never get done.
Come on, Fred.
With all the stuff I have going on. But I write a mean intro.
You do write a mean intro.
That's all I had time to do. So I'm so thankful for you. And you, along with Sherelle Ducksworth, wrote this curriculum together, which I'm so thankful for Sherelle as well. She's a PhD student at Southeastern in, what's systematic theology?
I'm not really sure. You know, we should know that. But I saw her last week and she was talking about taking a patristics class. And I was like, I remember, patristics. No, thank you.
But she's almost done. She's a phenomenal writer as well. And I love the fact that we get to highlight and promote the work of Black women and give them opportunities to write, to get their work out there, because there are not many places that give us opportunities in this space.
Yeah, they're not looking for us, or if we don't have a certain pedigree, right? Like if we don't have a doctorate, then we're not really even considered. And so, I have an MDiv and Sherelle is in the process of getting her PhD. And so, we wouldn't even be considered to write like apologetic, curriculum, or even, to be a part of a commentary series or things like that. And the truth is like, it's not that I'm opposed to higher education, but it's like, for me right now, it's like, what's better, being in a classroom or like being in a Bible study, being able to disciple people, being able to go to a local coffee shop and build relationships with people. Like right now in this season, I don't feel like higher ed is like the thing for me to do, because it would be a distraction, and that's actually like the legacy of a lot of African Americans. They feel like it's like either I can be in the trenches, or I can be in classrooms. But the ability to do both is really hard. When you think about it, like a lot of African American pastors and preachers, they were also bivocational. Right. So now I got to work full time. I got to be ready to preach on Sunday and care for the flock and also go to school. And that's just a lot to manage. And so we're seeing more and more of that like sort of change. But that's just as sort of, churches have been able to, fund pastor salaries and things like that. And so, so I don't know why I went on that tangent, but there we are.
No, I think you were just showing that the Black women don't often have the opportunities
Yeah.
to do things that especially in the apologetic space.
Yeah. You have to create your own lane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to be a Black woman in ministry, you have to create your own lane.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you know that, right? Because you have created your own lane. You're in the process of creating your own lane. I think about, the women of the Truth Table. They have created their own lane through through the podcast. I think about women like Jackie Hill Perry creating her own lane, Elizabeth Woodson creating their own lane. And I remember when one of my friends, I just was like graduating from Southeastern, and the question is always like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I want to work at a church. I want to work at a church. This is the kind of job I want. These are the things that I want to do. And there were just no jobs like that, because essentially in their mind, it's like, no, you're asking to be a pastor. And it's like, no, I just want to like shepherd small group leaders, like this. I just want to train them and help them to be effective in the process of making disciples. I'm not even asking to preach on Sunday, I'm just asking like to use my gifts in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, those roles in the context that I was in at that time were reserved for men. And so it was just really, really hard. And I remember one of my friends, Mo Hafiz, saying to me, like, Yana, you're going to have to carve your own lane. Mm-hmm. And I literally wanted to like punch him. I just wanted to punch him, find something to throw at him, because I was just like, that's not fair. Mm-hmm. That's not fair. Why do I have to create my own lane? Like, I want mentors. I want people to pave a way for me. Like, I don't always want to be the trailblazer, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm cool. I'm cool with following somebody else. I'm cool with like, standing on somebody else's shoulders. Like that would be great. But for a lot of women, and particularly Black women, we've had to create our own lane mm-hmm. in ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Let's transition to the curriculum. Courageous conversations, the tools you need for the conversations and culture. And this is really based off of our national conference. There were several conversations that had some overlap, and just some key questions that we thought we would help give a framework for the everyday Christian to have a really understanding of these topics. Because usually if you come to Courageous, it's scholars on the stage. And if you haven't been to seminary, it could be a bit intimidating to some, because they have no framework for some of the conversations. And so some people say it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's like so much information. And so what we wanted to do, we always want to curate resources for the local church. We always want to be a partner with the local church to help people grow and mature in their faith. Because I think, I always hear people like, man, they go to apologetics events like, this was so good. You helped me. You engaged me. And I think apologists do a disservice if they get people to engage with them and answer their questions, but then they have nowhere to send them because they haven't built relationships with local churches for people to grow. It's great to get your initial questions answered, your big apologetics questions, but you still have to grow in the faith through discipleship in the local church. And so we want to curate resources to help the local church be able to be equipped to defend their faith. And to know the questions that culture is asking, and to be able to engage with grace and truth, and wisdom. And so that's where Courageous Conversations came from, the idea. And I reached out to Yana and was like, hey, come to Jacksonville. You and Marsha, who is our multimedia director, came and we reviewed the tapes. I don't know how many we were here for.
Gosh. I remember that week.
It was like weeks of us on a board, just combing through, saying what we wanted to address, how I wanted the curriculum to look, kind of vision casting, throwing all my ideas at you, looking at that board, reviewing tapes. It was a fun time. I don't know if
it was a fun time. Like, the energy in the room was great. But I'll tell you, when I left, I was tired. I was so tired. Because like you said, like, these conversations are weighty. These conversations are complex. In a lot of ways, we're engaging with not just like our minds, but also our emotions. Mm-hmm. And because we are integrated people, like, that begins to affect us, physically. And so I remember Marsha, towards the end, she was like, yeah, I feel like you started like at a 10, and then by the end of it, you were at a 2, And I was like, yes, it's like, this was hard work. And even when I left, I was feeling like overwhelmed and like, Lord, like, am I the right person to do this, to speak to these things? Do I have enough experience? Do I have enough knowledge? Do I need to go back to school? Have I read enough books? Things like that. But I think one of the things the Lord always has helped me with in those moments to remember, like, that what I don't know is a superpower. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't know much about these topics. Mm-hmm. They don't know that there are literally like 5 different views on like eternal salvation, right? Like, mm-hmm. and how one is saved. There's like 5 of them, but we all know the question, like, is Jesus the only way? We just don't know that there are like literally 5 different ways that Christians answer those questions. And so I was just like, I don't know if I'm the best person to do that. But because I don't know so much, I usually use that as a way to think through, like, okay, what's the next question that I'm asking? Mm-hmm. Because whatever the next question I'm asking is probably like the next question that somebody else is going to be asking. And so it helps me to be a little bit more in tune to the audience, versus just like writing out of my head, because, it's like, I think about these things, mm-hmm. Every day. So, yeah. But I admire people who think about those things every day, like Dr. Vince Pan too. Like we need brothers like that, for sure. But I try to use my weakness as a superpower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the great thing about our curriculums is they're not written for scholars on a scholarly level. They're written, mm-hmm. for the everyday churchgoer. Mm-hmm. We try to keep it around that 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah.
I'm really strict about that, like, mm-hmm. making sure it's dumbed down for the everyday churchgoer. Because if we don't equip the church, the everyday church, then they're defenseless in culture.
Yeah.
And so, tell a little bit about, just give an overview of the chapters in the book for our audience.
Yeah. So the chapters in the book, I'm gonna refer to the book because it's been a minute and we're working on other things now. So my brain is like somewhere else completely.
I always have Yana working on it. I always have a new project after we have one. I have like 5.
Oh my gosh.
In my mind.
Yeah. So we're literally finishing one and starting another one.
Yes. And then there'll be another one after. We're going to recruit, if you're a talented, if you've just graduated from seminary, you have a passion to write, especially Black women, Black men too, because we have Brandon and George is on our writing team as well. Mm-hmm. So men and women, shoot us an email. I'm always looking for writers and new and up and coming apologists to highlight. So little plug.
That's a little plug. Yeah. So the chapters are, what is truth? Mm-hmm. Like, is truth absolute or is it relative? Is it something that is outside of us or is it something that we get to determine for ourselves? And then Sherelle writes a wonderful chapter on, can we trust the Bible? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to tell you, Sherelle challenged me. Like, so we writing our chapters and then I see this chapter. I'm like, yo, sis got like, she got like all these citations. Like, sis is in these books. Like,
yeah. Well, she in the PhD program, so she's just,
listen, even still, she is next level. I go to every time, like, I don't go to Southeastern Library often, but every now and again, because I'm not a student there anymore, but every now and again, I'll need a book. And when I'm there, I see Sherelle without fail. Her and her husband are in there. They got their own room, really, like just set up.
Yeah, because her husband is in the THM program and she's in the PhD program. So they're a dynamic duo of
power couple
scholars.
Oh my God. Yeah. Imagine having dinner with them. And then the other chapters are, is Jesus the only way? And then what is sin? Is sin primarily individual or is it systematic? You know, or is it both? And then Sherelle writes a chapter, what is justice? And then we, in chapter 6, we talk about what does the Bible say about same-sex relationships? And I'll be honest with you, I did not want to write that chapter. I did not want to write that chapter because I was like, listen, I'm not trying to be out here in these streets having people, you know, sliding into my DMs and all of that. I don't want that kind of drama in my life. But that was actually a really transformative chapter to write. It's interesting because I think the summer before we started this curriculum, I was invited to a college event. They were having a summer mission, and they asked me to come and talk about sexuality and same-sex relationships. And I was like, what? You know, like, first I was like, why me? Because they have had other people come in before who have books on this topic, who come from this experience. And for them, they were like, hey, one, we just kind of want to have someone who can help our students think well about this. So when I was flattered that they thought that I could do that, and also to get beneath the surface. And so I read a few books who were same-sex relationship affirming, some that were non-affirming. And I'll be honest with you, one of the things that I learned was just, there's a book called Us Versus Us, and I'm blanking on the author right now, but I know I quoted him in the book. But I was just really appreciative for how he had us think about same-sex relationships, or just really like people who are part of the LGBT plus community, because a lot of times we think that they're our enemy, but most of them come from some sort of evangelical church background. They grew up in youth group, you know, they served and went on trips with their churches, and when they expressed sort of what they were feeling, their same-sex attraction, they weren't met in healthy ways. And so because of that, they left the church. Or maybe there were things that were said from the pulpit, you know, that were really derogatory towards people of that community, but they still took it and internalized it in a way that caused them to think sort of hard things about themselves. And so even though we put forth what we believe to be a biblical position on this, we also are trying to help people to just be human, you know, to be better Christians, you know, and to love people and to listen and to ask questions and to not operate out of so much fear, you know, to the point where they're just trying to fix people or fix their theology or fix their behavior. Yeah. It's like, no, if we believe in a God who is mighty to save, you know, if we believe that people are saved by the Spirit and it's not our work, but that is the Lord's work, then we can kind of, you know, pull off the gas a little bit and have a conversation and do life with people. And so I hope that this resource, with all of the resources that we have already done together, like we always say, like in the overview document that nobody else sees, like we don't want to create monsters, right? We're not trying to create apologetic monsters. We're trying to create and disciple humans who can go into the world and like be Christ to others. And so so that's an overview of the book. That's kind of what our heart was behind it. And I can honestly say I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we did some pretty good writing in it.
Yeah, I did excellent. It was excellent writing. When I got the drafts and I was reading through, I was like, this is excellent work. And one of the reasons I think it's so excellent, and I mentioned it in the intro I wrote, is because it's apologetics from the margins. Black women are the most marginalized group in this country. And so when you're on the margins, you see things from a different vantage point.
Yeah.
You have to, because you're at the bottom, you had to interact with every other vantage point. That's something different than most apologetics that's written by white evangelical men. They're not saying that their stuff isn't good, but they're in a different space in society, so they don't have to interact with all the other aspects sometimes.
Yeah.
And so their vantage point is limited. But when you're at the bottom, you get to see things and interact with people in ways that give more nuance to the conversation, that make the conversation more layered, that adds a level of grace and truth to the conversation that many people miss. And I think that's one of the benefits of this, where we're answering, there's plenty of books on what is truth, sexuality, there's not a curriculum written from the perspective, and it's not even written just from the perspective of a Black woman, but being informed by the most marginalized group gives you a way to be able to connect to every group.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. No, that's good. That's really, really good. Yeah. I think I had to do some deep soul work, when I was writing some of these questions. And, the goal was to always be generous to people of different perspectives and to be able to explain why they believe what they believe. And we even have sections in there in the book where we talk about, what is truth? Well, how do we even get to this question, where people are now questioning truth? You think about the Enlightenment, the Enlightenment is a response to what I like to call Christians behaving badly, right? It's a response to sort of the Reformation. We celebrated a lot, or some people celebrated a lot, but there was a lot of blood that was shed after Martin Luther, nailed his theses, to the church door. There was a lot of bloodshed. There were arguments over baptism and communion and who could and what these things should look like. And you have the world looking on to that and being like, this look dumb. This don't look. It don't look like this works. It don't look like it's working for y'all. And so why would it work? Why would it work for me? And so because of that, they turn to rationalism, right? As a faith, as a way to make sense of the world, because what Christians were doing, was defaming the gospel and defaming God. And so, and you see this continue, with one generation to another, where, people are asking the question, is Christianity a white man's religion because of, the slaveholders, version of Christianity, and how that played such a significant part and still does, in the disparities and oppression that Black people experience today. So there's these apologetic questions sometimes come out of Christians behaving badly. Yeah. And it makes complete sense to me, because we look at, now I'm just, you look at John 17, where Jesus says, I pray that they would be one, and how their oneness is a profession, is a proclamation that God has sent him into the world, that it in a sense is, our oneness is evangelistic, And so when there's disunity, when there's disharmony, and those kinds of things, then it does the opposite. You know, instead of proclaiming the gospel, it defames it, right? And so we even talk about those things because we want people to know that people don't just get to these questions, you know, looking up at the sky. Like these questions weren't created in a vacuum. They were created in a particular context. And we as Christians have the responsibility to respond to those things, you know, to give an explanation to those things, to try to help people understand how, like, yes, we agree with you here and we grieve with you. However, this is the road that we're taking in terms of how we're answering this question, and we just want you to consider it.
Yeah, that's good. How do churches utilize this curriculum? Because so when you see the book online, you could get it and go through it yourself, do an individual study. I think that's great. But we also developed this to be done in groups. Now, the group doesn't have to be a small group at church. It could be you and some friends together. Because I think theology is best done in community.
Yeah.
That's what a mentor told me years ago, that theology is best done in community. And so we want you to get this with a group. And we have a leader's guide. So if you go on Amazon, you can see there's 2 versions. There's a leader's guide for those who are going to lead a small group in this. And then there's the book. So we have those resources for you. We also have a video series that I filmed that goes along with the book. So if you want to, it's an online course video series. So basically you could go on our website and hit the online course resource link, and it's Courageous Conversations as well. You'll see the same logo on there, and you can watch the video in your small group and then go through the chapter. We filmed the video, I think in December, in a really cool venue here in Jacksonville. So the video looks really cool, if I say so myself. But it goes in chapter 1. You can watch the video of me kind of giving an overview, then go through the book with your small group, and there's reflection questions and all of that. Being as you work with small groups, you've done that throughout. That's been a part of your ministry. If you were to get this in your hand as a small group leader, how would you want churches to go through that?
Yeah. Well, first I would say, you know, when you go to Amazon to buy the book, don't just buy one. Like, don't just buy one book. Buy 4 or 5, you know, so that you already know, like, hey, I'm going to do this in a group with other people. So you get 1 leader's guide, you get 3 to 4, you know, just, you know, readers' books, and you go through it together. And even though we provide you with a leader's guide, we provide you with everything from an icebreaker to questions to ask to how to close out, you know, the time. We give you everything you need. You still need to be prepared, you know. You need to lead the group by being prepared. So the idea is that everybody would walk through like lesson 1 or chapter 1 by themselves individually, and then they would come together to discuss it. And so you have homework, you know, and then you show up and then you walk through the leader's guide. And even in the leader's guide, it'll have you sort of go back to some of the reflection questions that you would have worked through in your individual reading. So yes, there are reflection questions in the book as well, so that as you're reading and you're comprehending and you're even thinking about your own personal experience and how God may be calling you to respond to what you have read. We also have questions in there where you're interacting with, you know, some of the cultural issues that we feel like are important. Sometimes we identify those things for you. Sometimes we let you identify those things for yourselves because we know that you have a brain, you know, you live in the world. So we don't try to answer all the questions for you, but we try to get you thinking about it. And then you just bring all of that to your small group time. And as a small group leader, as a facilitator, you know, well, as a small group leader, I will say your job is to facilitate the conversation. It's not necessarily to reteach the lesson. It's to facilitate the lesson. I feel most gratified as a small group leader when I do the least amount of talking. Mm-hmm. When I do the least amount of talking and I'm able to hear how other people are thinking, how other people are taking in the information. I always say you don't want to rob somebody of their own epiphany, right? And so, because if they have the epiphany on their own, it's going to stay with them longer. But if I just give it to them, it's not going to stay with them as long. Mm-hmm. But they're going to have an experience where they're like, hey, like, I was able to think of this, the Spirit led me to this conclusion. I was able to integrate these things, and that's going to stay with them a little bit longer than you telling them. And so our goal as small group leaders are to facilitate, to not rob, others of their epiphany, but to try to lead them there with asking questions. And so, it's like somebody says, I grew up in a home where that was really strict. Well, how did that affect your view of God? Mm-hmm. How has that caused you to, in light of that, do you see yourself more as, a person who strives for freedom? You're always trying to go up against the bounds of life, or do you find yourself more cautious? How have those things affected you? And so we try to. Those are the kind of questions that you want to ask. You want to help get them to get deeper into those things. And so even like with this, it's like if somebody says something sort of outlandish in group, they say, I don't believe that. I believe this. And you ask them why. You don't get all like, you don't have to puff your chest up or nothing. It's just like, hey, okay, well, can you explain to me why you believe that? So even in this group, these groups that you might have, you might find out that there's some people that you thought believe the same things that you believed. And then it's like, oh, you don't, And in those moments, we need to play the slow game, which is asking more questions, getting time with them, not embarrassing them in group, right? And it's like, oh, man, I'd love to talk to you about that later, and maybe getting coffee to pull out their world view so that you can get a better understanding of what they believe and why they believe it.
Yeah. And the goal is to equip everyday churchgoers to be able to have understanding, not a seminary level understanding, but a basic understanding. So when they have these conversations in the world with unbelievers, with skeptics, they'll be able to have their own courageous conversations. Yeah. So what they see on the stage at the national conference, which is September 2nd and 3rd, by the way, in Washington, D.C. at National Community Church. Register now. Early bird registration is almost up. So you better get those tickets now if you want to get early bird. Last year we sold out of in-person tickets, so you definitely want to get those early. It will be in person and online this year. So if you can't join us in DC, you can stream it online. But definitely come. It's going to be an amazing time. This year's theme is the scholar and the skeptic. And the whole thing about scholar and skeptic is basically what are questions that skeptics are asking in the culture. So we're talking about, is Christianity a white man's religion? Is Christianity bad for women? Is Christianity bad for the LGBTQ community? Just a whole gamut of questions. You could get your tickets at courageousconvos.org. Shameless. I wanted to put that plug in because sometimes if we put the commercial at the end, y'all skip it. So I wanted to plug it in the middle of the episode. But we want you not just to come to the conference. Definitely come to the conference, but also get the curriculum so you won't just be watching the conversations, but you'll be having the conversations. And that's what we want. We want Christians to be equipped to engage culture with grace and truth, and to be good listeners. We already try to demonstrate listening through Why I Don't Go and from people to person, but we also want to give you the tools to not only listen, but when it's time for you to speak, be able to have something to say that reflects the truth of the gospel message. And so, Yana, what else that we haven't discussed about the curriculum that you think our audience should know before we close out?
I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good. I think me and Sherelle, we write from a personal place. So we share some of our own stories. We share some of our own experience, some conversations that we've had with people. I share a story about a conversation I had in a coffee shop where it just kind of ended with both of us kind of laughing, but me still being sad at the end of it. And so I think we do the best that we can to get beneath the surface of some of these questions, and even to help other people to learn how to get beneath the surface of these questions. But yeah, it's a resource that I'm proud of. And I want people to read it, and to be blessed by it. Yeah, and I'm just thankful to be here. I'm just thankful to be here, part of the Jude 3 family, and continuing to create resources that serve the church, that encourage the believer, that gives them confidence in their faith, and that also helps other people who maybe been struggling with Christianity and the church, to reconnect in a way that is real and helpful for them. So yeah, I think it's a really good resource.
Well, thank you, Yana, for joining us. How can people get in contact with you on social?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Yana Janae. You'll get, all things Yana Janae. And then
you have a podcast.
I have a podcast. I do have a podcast. It's called Living Single with Yana Janae. So you can find that on Apple, Spotify, and Google. And there I'm having a very different conversation. Having a conversation about singleness, and really wanted to move that conversation beyond contentment to celebration, because the Bible says that it's a gift, and so through the podcast, the goal is to help people to unwrap that gift and enjoy it for all that it is. But what's funny is that we're using all the same tools. I'm just giving an apologetic for, living your best life while you're single, and helping people to think well about singleness, because I feel like a lot of our perceptions about singleness, our worldview, is more so shaped by the culture than it is by the Word of God. And so yeah, I do that, and I got a website, yanajanae.com. So yeah, you can find me there. Working on, trying to. I'm not really on Twitter, y'all, because Twitter is just it's too heartbreaking for me. It's too stressful. And then got a Facebook page as well, but Instagram, that's where I'm really at.
Well, thank you for joining us, Yana. We appreciate you being here. Y'all get this curriculum, Courageous Conversations, now on Amazon, or it's on Barnes & Noble as well. And also, go through it in your church. Get your whole church to go through it. Go through it if you have just a friend group. I think this is a good resource for y'all to go through. Get it today. So you could also, like I said, the video series online course. That online course is not the only online course. We have tons of other online courses at learn.jude3project.org. We also have another curriculum through Eyes of Color that we mentioned earlier. And with the Through Eyes of Color, we also have a video series now with Right Now Media. So I did a video series for Through Eyes of Color with Right Now Media. So if you have Right Now Media, you could go watch the Through Eyes of Color video series, get the guideline. They have like a guide that goes along with it on Right Now Media, but also you could get the curriculum to go along with it. It'll bless you. So you can do that in your church. So make sure your church is plugged into Jude 3 and doing the Right Now Media series get the Through Eyes of Color, then get Courageous Conversations and do the video series on our website as well. Remember, if you want to support the ministry, Every Gift Helps Equip, you could give at jude3project.org. Hit that donate tab. There's an option to give online or option to give by mail, and there's the address there where you can mail your gift in. No gift is too small or too large. We need your support to continue to do what we do and to produce more resources like these. Remember, here at the Jude 3 Project, we're helping you to know what you believe and why you believe it. Until next time, grace and peace, and God bless.